Altered Destiny by Wayne Armstrong. Read by Steve Parker. Sogne, Norway, 806 AD. Ingvar crept towards the entrance of his father's apartments, the tired groan of each hoary floorboard threatening to betray his presence to the night watchman. He bit at his lower lip and pressed on to find the door standing open. The fire burned low in the hearth, spitting and crackling while its soft light played amongst the shadows, but the space appeared to be unoccupied. The boy of only 5 winters entered and crossed to the bedroom, his eyes large and every movement measured as he placed an ear against the warm planks of the door. Nothing. He reached for the handle and paused upon remembering his stepmother's screams. During the worst of it, he'd hoped she might be dying, though now, in that whispering darkness, he hardly dared to draw breath. Urged on by some deep impulse, Ingvar turned the handle and pushed the door ajar to peer inside. A scattering of candles illuminated the royal bedchamber. At the center of the bed, atop a black bear's pelt, lay a writhing bundle of pale blue cloth. Without a thought, he paced closer. Ingvar stood on his tiptoes and reached over, tugging at the cloth to reveal a tiny pink face with searching eyes. He gasped, and the wrinkled baby gave a cry when it saw him, no more than the pitiful bleat of a newborn among the herds.
"What are you doing in here?"
Ingvar flinched at the hollow tone of her voice. He turned around to see Gyda standing in the doorway. She wore a long nightdress tied at the front, with a shawl about her shoulders, and her straight black hair appeared unkempt.
"I was looking for my father. Do not lie to me, you know your father is away."
Ingvar dropped his gaze. The baby's cries intensified as he backed away when Gyda approached the bed. He'd heard men say that his stepmother possessed a face to calm the wildest waters, but to him she had always appeared as cold and hard as weathered stone. Gyda scooped up her precious bundle and passed Ingvar to exit the bedchamber and sit in a chair by the hearth. Ingvar followed, and she bared a breast, offered it to the infant, who nuzzled and complained before settling.
"Leave me. I must rest."
Gyda spoke the words as an instruction, yet Ingvar remained as though spellbound.
"Is it?"
She looked up.
"A boy? Yes. So it is my brother. His name is Thorir."
She returned her attention to the babe.
"And one day you will be a king, my treasure. Father said I'll be king."
Gyda's expression soured further.
"It has been foretold in the runes. The gods favor Thorir. But I'm older."
"Before your father departed, he told you to do as I say,"
Gyda snapped.
"Now return to your room, child."
Ingvar frowned at his stepmother and exited the apartment. He dashed to the end of the corridor and used both hands to wrest back the bolt of the hall's rear entrance. A cold gust swept past him as it opened. He stepped out and heaved the door shut before running across the grounds of the enclosure to where he'd stood a crate against the inside of the palisade wall. The thick scent of smoldering peat carried from the longhouses in the settlement below. He climbed onto the crate and pulled himself up, swinging a leg over the fence top to sit astride the crossbeam. Ingvar gazed out beyond the town to where a crescent moon hung low in the sky over Grimsfjord, its yellow light refracting silver and blue between the darkened slopes and peaks. He considered Gyda's words and shrugged. His father had once told him that the Aesir hold no sway over those who weave the threads of fate, and that a man must have the courage to walk his own path. He didn't need the gods or their favor.
"Curse you all,"
he called over the wind.
"I will be king."
825 AD. Ingvar admired the sea serpent as he walked along the water's edge. The sleek vessel epitomized adventure, restless in her mooring while his captains made their final check of the rigging and rearranged the provisions. The familiar sounds of toiling smiths and tanners rang out from the town, even so late in the afternoon, and Ingvar turned in that direction to see his brother approaching, flanked by a pair of attendants. Prince Thorir smiled, yet malice lived in his gaze. The man stood half a head taller than most, his dark hair and beard combed and oiled, while the expensive linen tunic he wore strained about his broad shoulders and paunch. The three men came to a standstill before Ingvar.
"That's a fine fleet you've put together," Thorir said. "To where will you sail on this grand expedition?"
"Why do you ask?"
"Can I not show an interest in my brother's undertakings? How about you make a trip of your own instead?"
Thorir leered, and Ingvar moved a step aboard the Serpent.
"Set a course for the kingdom of Northumbria,"
he called to his navigator. The Sea Serpent moved off under the power of 30 oarsmen, and the fleet soon left Grimsfjord behind to join a wider channel of water that opened out between forested peaks glazed with spring frost. Ingvar stood to review the formation, with tall prow stems and banks of oars that rose and fell in perfect sweeping symmetry. The longships bore resemblance to mythical winged beasts in the twilight. His heart rate increased, and Ingvar stifled a grin when he considered the scale of his undertaking. More than 700 men had mustered, ready to brave any danger on his command, and reliant on his cunning to provide them ample reward. A throne should be earned, not given, and his deeds would come to surpass those of all the kings that came before. He sat as the Serpent's crew began to raise her mast and unfurl the sail. A stony expression settled over Ingvar's face when he beheld the vast wilds of the North Sea. His destiny was in the making.